Picture this. It is 1933. You are standing on the manicured grounds of Göttingen University in Germany. And above you, an airplane flies past. But it is a far cry from the smooth, soaring, quiet experience we associate with flight today.
Oh, yeah, it is definitely not that.
It is absolutely deafening. I mean, the massive piston engines are knocking, the metal propellers are just violently chopping the air, and the whole machine looks and sounds like it is vibrating so intensely, it might just shake itself apart in the sky.
Right, it's a very violent mechanical process.
Exactly. And watching this as a 21-year-old physics student who is just profoundly, viscerally annoyed by all that noise and rattling, he looks up and thinks, there has to be a more elegant way to fly without those clunky propellers.
And that irritation right there in that exact moment sparks an idea for a completely revolutionary kind of engine.
Yeah, and the crazy part is, almost at the exact same time, across the English Channel, a British Royal Air Force officer is sketching out a remarkably similar dream. And just like that, the race to the jet age has begun.
It's such a cinematic image, and I think it perfectly sets the stage for our deep dive today.
Welcome, everyone. We're exploring the life of that annoyed 21-year-old student.
Hans von Ohain.
Right.
Yeah.
A German physicist who fundamentally transformed aviation history by designing the engine that actually powered the world's very first jet aircraft flight.
And the mission for this deep dive is to get past the basic, textbook diagrams of how a jet engine works. If you are a fan of aviation, you likely know the basic physics.
Sure.
But the human story behind its actual creation is just stunning. I mean, we are talking about a university car garage project, massive sheets of shooting flames, secret patents.
Oh, the secret patents are fascinating.
Yeah, and a bitter international rivalry that surprisingly eventually evolved into a really profound friendship.
The parallel paths here really define this whole era of aeronautical innovation. Right, and that simultaneous invention is exactly where I want to start.
Yeah.
Because to me, it feels like two brilliant people locked in completely separate, soundproof rooms, both desperately trying to invent the smartphone at the exact same time.
It's a great way to look at it.
It is this incredible paradigm shift, right?
Yeah.
Moving from the analog era of knocking pistons to the digital era of smooth, continuous thrust.
And neither of them initially knows the other is even working on it.
Yeah, and to understand Ohain's path to that paradigm shift, we really have to look at the environment he was in. In the 1930s, the University of Göttingen was one of the absolute major centers for aeronautical research globally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He is attending lectures by giants in aerodynamics like Frank Whittle.
Yeah.
But the really fascinating detail here is that Ohain isn't an aircraft mechanic by training.
Right.
He's a physicist. He actually earned his PhD in 1935 with a thesis on an optical microphone that recorded sound directly to film.
Which is, brilliant for the film industry, but it has absolutely nothing to do with airplanes.
Nothing at all. Yet his frustration with aviation just remained his driving force. He believed the elegance of flying was totally spoiled by the vibration of the piston engine. So he approaches the problem not like a mechanic trying to build a better piston, but like a physicist thinking about thermodynamic cycles.
Exactly. He's looking at the math of it.
Right. He envisions a solution based on what he called a constant work process. And let me just break down the physics of that for a second for you. Traditional piston engines work in violent pulses. So it's intake, compression, combustion, exhaust.
Or as the aviation world calls it, suck, squeeze, bang, blow.
Yeah, exactly. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. And in a piston engine, this happens in individual explosive bursts inside a single cylinder. Ohain wanted to stretch that cycle out continuously. Constant compression, constant combustion, constant expansion.
And he chose a relatively simple conceptual layout to achieve that continuous flow. He decided on a radial compressor paired with a radial turbine, placing them back to back with a combustion chamber wrapped around the outside. So in a radial system, you use centrifugal force. The spinning blades fling the incoming air outward from the center to compress it. Once it's compressed, you mix it with fuel, ignite it, and the rapidly expanding exhaust gases rush over a turbine at the back, spinning it.
Right, and because the turbine is connected to the same shaft as the compressor at the front, the engine basically sustains its own operation.
Exactly, it feeds itself.
Which, the math on the chalkboard makes perfect sense.
Oh.
But taking it from a chalkboard to reality is where this story gets so wild. Because Ohain doesn't go to a massive aerospace lab to build his first prototype.
No, he does not.
He takes his sports car to a local automotive garage called Bartels and Becker. And he gets to talking with a mechanic there named Max Hahn.
Right, just a regular local mechanic.
Yeah. And Ohain ends up paying Hahn 500 Reichsmarks out of his own pocket to build a physical demonstration model. They used sheet metal, which was literally put together by the blacksmith in Hahn's village.
And then they decide to test this handcrafted, garage engine right there in the university courtyard.
Which is insane.
Yeah. They use a small electric motor to get the main shaft spinning.
And the result is just a spectacular physical failure. The aerodynamics inside the homemade chamber weren't balanced properly at all. So instead of the fuel mixing and burning inside the combustor to drive the system, the rushing air simply blew the unignited petrol straight through the turbine blades.
Yep.
And it didn't catch fire until it hit this scorching hot exhaust duct at the very back of the engine. So wait, he basically built a highly explosive 500 mark flamethrower in a university courtyard.
Pretty much, yeah.
How did he not get expelled for that?
Honestly, it is a minor miracle he wasn't, but you really have to factor in his boss here, Robert Richard Pohl, who was the director of the Physical Institute. Pohl wasn't just some strict administrator, he saw the underlying science.
Oh, so he recognized what Ohain was actually trying to do.
Exactly. The failure in the courtyard proved a specific engineering bottleneck. It showed that Ohain and Hahn couldn't build a reliable combustion chamber in a car garage. They needed real aerospace engineering expertise, industrial metallurgy, and, major funding.
Right.
So Pohl didn't reprimand Ohain. Instead, he recognized they needed a partner who, as Pohl put it, doesn't back away from new ideas.
Which transitions us perfectly from the realm of academic physics into the totally cutthroat world of industrial manufacturing. Pohl wrote a letter to Ernst Heinkel, the rather eccentric aircraft manufacturer, in February 1936.
And a meeting is arranged, and Heinkel is incredibly blunt. I mean, he looks at Ohain's courtyard flamethrower and states that the garage engine will never work.
Ouch.
Yeah. But Heinkel recognizes that the fundamental thermodynamic concept behind it is completely sound. He is convinced enough to hire both Ohain and the mechanic, Max Hahn, moving them to a special, highly secretive development facility at the Marina Airfield.
Okay, so they finally have real backing. But even with Heinkel's massive resources and his top machinists, they immediately hit a brick wall. The metal in the combustion chamber just keeps burning up. The fuel isn't mixing cleanly.
Yeah, the combustion was the hardest part.
And this is where Ohain relies on his physics background to engineer a brilliant workaround. Getting liquid petrol to burn evenly requires atomization. You have to turn the liquid into a fine mist.
Right.
Think of it like trying to light a solid log of wood on fire with a single match. It just doesn't catch easily. But if you turn that log into a cloud of sawdust, it ignites violently and instantly.
That's a great way to explain it.
Right. Atomizing fuel is essentially making liquid sawdust. But their combustor couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So Ohain decides to isolate his variables. He temporarily abandons liquid gasoline entirely and switches the engine to gaseous hydrogen.
Which is brilliant because hydrogen is already a gas, so it completely bypasses the need for atomization. Ohain knew its diffusion and combustion speed was substantially greater than petrol.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by piping in pressurized hydrogen, it mixed and burned almost instantly and cleanly. And this allowed the team to verify if the compressor and turbine aerodynamics actually worked without the failing combustor ruining the entire experiment.
That is wild. That's like trying to perfect a new baking recipe, but the oven keeps breaking, so you just decide to cook it with a blowtorch to see if the dough is actually any good.
Exactly.
It is isolating the variable in the most extreme, literal way possible.
It was a necessary extreme, though, and it completely paid off. By March of 1937, this hydrogen prototype, the HES-1, successfully ran. It proved the core aerodynamics were sound.
Amazing.
And with that confirmed, they could finally focus all their energy on redesigning the combustor for liquid fuel, which they achieved by September 1937. It wasn't ready to fly yet, but it proved beyond any doubt that a turbojet could generate thrust.
And that proof sets off this rapid chain of refinement. They moved from the HES-1 to the S-3, machining parts instead of bending sheet metal, trying to make it compact enough to fit inside an airframe. And all of this leads to a monumental climax on August 27, 1939.
Yeah, the engine is installed in the Heinkel He-178, a specially built test aircraft. Test pilot Eric Warsitz climbs into the cockpit and takes off. It becomes the very first jet-powered aircraft flight in human history.
Wow.
With Heinkel's immense financial backing and his willingness to gamble on an unproven concept, Ohain and his team had won the race to the sky, beating the British to the air by almost 2 full years.
But, and this is a big but, There is a giant elephant in the room regarding this victory.
Yes, there is.
We framed this earlier as a simultaneous invention, right? Two isolated minds having the same breakthrough. But looking closely at the historical sources, we really have to challenge that myth. I mean, is it really fair to call it simultaneous invention if Ohain literally read Whittle's homework before building his own engine?
Oh, it is one of the most debated points in aviation history, for sure. And the reality is highly nuanced. It is absolutely true that Ohain was completely unaware of Whittle's physical, real-world experiments in Britain.
Okay.
But back in 1935, while Ohain's own patent was still being prepared, and crucially, before he had built that garage engine, his patent lawyer handed him a copy of Frank Whittle's published patent.
Wait, so he saw the actual schematics?
He did.
And his reaction to Whittle's design was actually incredibly critical, right? Ohain thought Whittle's use of a dual-entrance radial flow compressor looked, quote, monstrous. He felt the way the air had to reverse flow inside Whittle's design was aerodynamically undesirable, concluding it was just an unrefined idea that probably wasn't being seriously developed.
Yeah, he wasn't impressed. But even with his criticism, seeing the patent force a legal reality on the German team, Whittle had undeniably planted the intellectual property flag in the ground first. Ohain's team actually had to narrow the claims on their own patent application to ensure they didn't infringe on the concepts Whittle had already publicly documented.
So the race was incredibly tight, both in the patent office and in the sky. But this leads us to the broader, much darker reality of World War II. Ohain wins the race to make the first flight in 1939. So why didn't his centrifugal engines power the German war machine? Why did his designs get sidelined during the conflict?
It really came down to a battle of engineering philosophies, specifically between radial centrifugal compressors, which Ohain and Whittle championed, and axial flow compressors, which other German engineers at Junkers and BMW were developing.
And the aerodynamic difference between those two is massive. So a centrifugal engine flings the air outward from the center shaft. Yeah. To do that, the engine has to be very wide. Imagine trying to push a giant dinner plate through the air, face first. It creates a massive frontal cross-section, which results in huge aerodynamic drag. An axial engine, on the other hand, pulls the air straight through a series of fan blades along the central axis. It's shaped more like a javelin.
Exactly, much sleeker.
It has a much smaller frontal area, meaning drastically less drag, which is obviously far better suited for a high-speed fighter aircraft.
Right, and despite the axial designs having terrible durability problems at the time, the metals kept melting under the sustained heat, the German government recognized that low drag potential. They directed critical wartime funding away from Ohain's later centrifugal designs and pushed the axial engines, the Junkers Jumo 004 and the BMW 003, into mass production.
Which sets up one of the most incredible historical coincidences of the war. After years of separate, highly secretive development across different nations, using entirely different engineering philosophies, the first operational turbojet fighters from both sides entered service almost exactly at the same time.
It's wild to think about.
The German Me-262, powered by the Junkers axial engines, entered operational use on July 26, 1944. And the British Gloster Meteor, powered by Whittle's centrifugal design, entered service on July 27, 1944.
Wow.
Just one single day apart.
Yeah, and the deployment numbers varied quite a bit. The Me-262 saw significant combat deployment with hundreds of machines, while the Meteor saw much more limited operational action. But the fact that these twin pillars of innovation culminated in deployments separated by a mere 24 hours is just a stark testament to the intense parallel pressures of wartime engineering.
Absolutely. So when the war ends, Ohain finds himself in a really strange position. His specific engines weren't the ones mass-produced, while Frank Whittle's reverse-flow centrifugal designs actually became the foundational basis for much of early post-war aviation.
Right.
So what happens to a pioneering scientist when the world basically moves past his initial life's work?
Well, his story experiences a really dramatic geographic and intellectual shift. In 1947, Ohain is brought to the United States under Operation Paperclip, which was the U.S. program that recruited German scientists.
Okay.
He is placed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, eventually becoming the chief scientist of the Aero Propulsion Laboratory. And his focus shifts from early turbojets to concepts that sound like absolute science fiction.
Well, the ideas he developed at Wright-Patterson are just mind-bending. For example, he spearheaded research into gas core reactor rockets.
Yeah, that one is crazy.
This is essentially nuclear thermal propulsion. The goal was to figure out how to use a nuclear reaction to superheat a propellant, like hydrogen, but doing so while the nuclear fuel itself is in a gaseous plasma state.
Right.
And doing all of that without accidentally venting highly radioactive material out the back of the rocket, I mean, it is bleeding-edge physics.
Seriously. He also dove heavily into magnetohydrodynamics, or MHD.
And the physics of MHD are just as wild. Ohain was trying to extract power directly from the sheer speed of hot exhaust gases coming out of a coal-fired power plant.
Yep.
If you pass superheated electrically conductive exhaust plasma through a powerful magnetic field, Faraday's law of induction states that you will generate a direct electric current. Ohain wanted to squeeze massive efficiency out of a fuel source without the need to spin a physical steam turbine.
Which is incredible. The materials of the era simply couldn't survive the brutal heat to make it commercially viable, but the sheer ambition to rethink power generation like that is staggering.
Truly.
And he also tackled vertical flight, inventing the concept of the jet wing for VTOL aircraft. The idea was to bleed high-pressure air directly from the jet engine's compressor and route it into large vents built into the wings.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, this would suck in a massive volume of outside air to create a powerful downward thrust column for vertical lift. It was a concept that was actually tested in the experimental Rockwell XF-V12 aircraft.
But amidst all this hardcore futuristic hardware, it is actually the human connection in his post-war life that truly anchors his legacy. Two specific moments really stand out. First, after spending years on opposite sides of a global conflict, Ohain and Frank Whittle finally meet.
That must have been quite the meeting.
Yeah, and the two men who simultaneously raced to invent the jet engine actually become deep, lifelong friends. In 1991, they stand side by side to jointly accept the prestigious Charles Stark Draper Prize for their independent development of the turbojet.
It is a beautiful resolution to one of engineering's greatest rivalries, really. And the second moment, however, might have an even more direct impact on the aircraft flying today, and that is his dedication to mentorship.
Right.
At Wright-Patterson, Ohain mentors a brilliant student named Paul Bevilacqua. Ohain's influence fundamentally shifts Bevilacqua's mindset from theoretical mathematics to practical applied engineering.
Bevilacqua summarized that mentorship perfectly.
Yep.
He said, "In school I learned how to move the pieces, and Hans taught me how to play chess."
I love that quote.
It's so good. Ohain transitioned from being the star quarterback trying to win the game to the legendary coach. He went from a lone inventor bending sheet metal in a garage to the architect of a new generation of engineering minds.
Exactly.
Because Bevilacqua takes that mindset and goes on to invent the Rolls-Royce lift system, which is the exact technology that allows the modern F-35B stealth fighter to hover and land vertically today.
And that lineage of thought is Ohain's true legacy. He taught the next generation how to truly visualize thermodynamic cycles and manipulate mass flow to achieve the seemingly impossible. He didn't design the axial engines that ultimately dominated large-scale commercial flight, but his relentless drive was the catalyst that dragged humanity into the jet age.
And his specific engineering DNA is still physically flying above us. One of his later wartime inventions, the ASCO-1 engine, actually combined an axial compressor for the main airflow squeeze with a radial compressor for the final high-pressure punch.
Right.
Today, that exact combined configuration is the standard concept used in most modern business jets, turboprops, and helicopters.
He truly changed the speed of human travel forever.
And it all traces back to a young man standing on a university lawn in 1933, simply because he was profoundly annoyed by the noise and vibration of a machine. It really leaves you with a profound thought. Look around you today. Pay attention to your frustrations. What everyday annoyance, what loud, clunky, or inefficient piece of technology are you dealing with that is just waiting for someone to get annoyed enough to finally invent the future? Keep that in mind the next time you are stuck waiting on a slow machine.